What is the most horrible thing you've seen a child do or say that made your blood boil? Story 1. This'll be buried, but what the heck, it's a fond memory. Over the past couple of years, I've spent a lot of time on the Washington State Ferry Island. Depending on the route, it can be anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 hours crossing from Anacortes to San Juan out, screw being above decks. With several other people in an enclosed space. When it's cold, the particular ferry we were on that day was a 2-hour ride, and the then-boyfriend and me went up to the loungy general area to take team nap because we'd decided to walk on instead of drive. This little kid, probably 5 or 6, decided that all 3 of the racing arcade games on that level were his and his alone. He would scream back to his parents for quarters, and they would dutifully walk across the ferry under the weighted glares of other passengers to feed the little hellion more coins to stuff the machines with. One of the machines expired, by virtue of time and a timid-looking kid. Maybe 12 came over and put his own quarters into the machine and sat down to play. The little crap went ballistic, flailing fists and teeth and tears and expletives, and the older kid just shrank away. I was finally about to stand up because, seriously, enough. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw this straight-backed, button-up shirt-wearing man in his 80s striding towards the 2 of them. The man reaches the flailing crotch fruit, picks him up by the back of his pants and shirt, walks him over to the table where the parents are dazedly staring off into space, deposits said child firmly, face down, on the table, and says calmly and clearly, "Deal with your child before I am tempted to deal with him further," and looked meaningfully to the double doors that led to the edge of the boat. That man is one of my heroes, and I hope to live long enough that it's socially acceptable for me to punish other people's kids. Dang straight, kids are annoying AF. And that's coming from someone who just had their first kid and understands probably what these parents are going through. But even so, it's your responsibility. You asked for this. You got to look after the kid. Don't make it other people's problems. Story 2. I worked at a grocery store during high school as a cashier. One typical busy Sunday, I was ringing out an older lady who was buying among her normal groceries a birthday cake for her husband. They had recently celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary, and it was his 79th birthday. She had a large sheet cake with the typical happy birthday greeting and a photo of him at his first birthday after getting back from Europe in World War II. She left it in her cart until I had rang everything else out so as not to damage it. A child was with his family in line behind her. The lady begins to lift the cake out, and the child screams, "Oh, cake, I want some." The lady politely says, "You do? This is for my husband. Do you think he will like it?" The child shrieks, "Yeah, I do, and I want some." The lady giggles and says, "Oh, no, hon, I would like to, but I have a lot of people waiting for it. Maybe your mommy and daddy will buy you one." The kid, obviously not used to being told no, throws a fit and does a Hulk smash down through the plastic into the cake and giggles, and he licks his hands. The lady is speechless. Meanwhile, the child's parents are laughing and saying the usual, "Oh, you're so funny." The kid is still giggling and saying how fun it was. I chime in and ask them what their problem was, thinking it is okay for their kid to do that. They just say, "He's 8, what can I do?" I said, "Punish him. Learn how to raise your child." Should I go on? I close my line down and leave them standing there while I go back to the bakery to fix her cake. After about 20 minutes of cake surgery by our bakery ladies, reprinting a new edible image and new piping, the cake was good as new. Parents complained, but after I told my manager, she took my side and all was well. Too long, didn't read, butthole child Hulk smashes an elderly woman's cake for her husband, child, and parents not remorseful. Story 3. I used to be pretty heavily involved in volunteering for this after-school violin program in a mostly Hispanic neighboring town. The woman who ran it had a heart of gold and worked really hard to make it a really fun community program with the parents and siblings involved. So she threw a pool party that all the families were invited to. The student in the program brought his mother and 2 younger brothers, one every year at my parents' house. One very active of the brothers was probably in first grade or so, and already had a horrible reputation as this awful hellion. He had been expelled from kindergarten for throwing a tantrum and screaming, one at nurses, at the teacher when she tries to calm him down. I heard it took several adults to drag him out of the room. Anyway, at the pool party, he was acting pretty normally until my friend, who had offered to help the lifeguard, told him to stop splashing. To put this in context, my friend is black, and when this kid tells her, "Don't tell me what to do, N-word," God, I can't. And came to my very white town to go to high school, so she's understandably a little race conscious. So when this even writes it, she just bursts into tears. We kicked the kid out of the pool and explained to her that he was just a tiny butthole, but she was inconsolable for a long time. She was just trying to be nice and help out at a party. What a horrible child. That's when you hold him under until he stops splashing. Story 4. Every Christmas, I head up to Boston to visit a friend while he's home from college, and his family always hosts a massive New Year's party. There's this one family who brings this young child of theirs, I want to say maybe 10-ish years old. Part of the party is spent playing Mario Party and Super Smash Bros. On the GameCube in the basement. This most recent New Year, my friend and I and a few others were playing Mario Party in the basement, and this kid comes down and screams, "I want to play Super Smash Bros." And I said, "Sure, after this game." And he yelled, "No, I want to play now." We said, tough luck, and turned our heads back to our game. The kid proceeded to grab a pool cue and start screaming and whacking my friend's face. He ended up with a black eye and multiple bruises. After I wrestled the pool cue away from him, his drunk parents came down, and after we explained the situation to them, they scolded me for being rough with their kid, and their kid got off scot-free because he didn't know any better. I don't care how old your child is. If he doesn't know any better, you're a bad parent. I want to round up the parents of every single kid in this thread into one big room and explain to them calmly that their children are not special. They are not the sun of the earth, and that they need to learn that the world does not revolve around them. Then I'd punch them all in the face, one by one. Story 5. My cousin was freaking terrible as a kid. His mom had had 4 miscarriages before she had him, so she always treated him like an angel, no matter what he did. One weekend, he stayed with my grandparents, and they took him to a baseball game, even though they didn't have much money. They bought him a bat with a team name on it because he begged for it, and they always tried to spoil him as much as they could. "Well, I can just hit you in the head with this bat and take your wallet," with a crap-eating grin on his face. Then he asked for a jersey, too, and they politely said no, they simply couldn't afford it. He then said to my grandpa's face, what he didn't remember is that my grandpa was a high school superintendent for nearly 40 years and doesn't take crap from anyone, especially bratty kids. Apparently, my grandpa grabbed his arm, put him over his knee, and spanked the crap out of him in front of everyone. They took him back to his parents' house and told my aunt that they'd let him visit again when he was more well-mannered. I laugh every time I think about it. Your grandpa is a freaking boss. Story 6. There was a group of little kids from down the street every day would torment my dog by throwing rocks at him and screaming, running up and down the fence. One day, after living there for years and then being a few years older and more bold now, I decided it would be a good idea to stick his face against the fence and taunt my dog. Needless to say, my dog lost his crap and bit the kid once, was about a quarter-inch below taking his eye out. He ran home crying. Cut to 30 minutes later with cops and his dong-head father at my house demanding I destroy my dog. Had to put him up for adoption. Family told me a friend on a farm had room for him. Don't know if that was really true or if it was a BS kid story. To this day, I hate that little crap and think he got only what he deserved. This makes me so unbelievably mad. Growing up, I was taught you respect animals, or they can and will frick your crap up, and it will be your fault. You were on the dog's property. He was defending his home. Little sucker deserved worse than he got. Story 7. I'm currently an au pair looking after 3 children. One day, the middle child had a few friends over who were just leaving when I started my shift. I went upstairs, and the girl's room was a disaster. Crap just everywhere. I informed the girl that she must help me clean in her room. Being nice, I didn't even have to help. She threw a fit and started crying, and when I asked her to hand me a pile of cards, she kicked them, and they went all over the room. I told her to pick those up for doing that, and she stopped crying and stared at me with an intense fury and replied, "Why should I? Isn't that your job?" with emphasis in tone on the job. She is 7. I wanted to throw her down the stairs right then and there. 7-year-old first world problem. My room was a mess and my au pair wouldn't even clean it. I don't know what people expect their kids to turn out like when they have to hire other people to raise their children. Story 8. This is probably going to seem minor in comparison to all the other comments I've read here, but here's my story. When I was in 8th grade, they canceled the school buses. My neighbor at the time happened to work at the school I went to, so she offered to drive me in. It was pretty cool at first, but her child was a little hellion. One time we were in the car together, and she called me a loser for liking books. I was just blown away that a 5-year-old would try to insult me like that when I'd done nothing but be pleasant to her and did nothing. She was pretty much a passive-aggressive witch, though. She started to drop me off further and further away from the school, drop me off like 2 hours early, or drive past the school to drop her daughter off, which made me late for class. She'd also locked the car door on me and refused to let me out until I said thank you. I'm starting to feel pretty dumb. Prior to reading this thread, I'd never heard the word hellion in the wild, and now there's been 3 stories where people have mentioned it. Maybe I should read more to expand my vocabulary. Or maybe I've just been lucky enough in life where I've never actually met a hellion in the real world. Who knows? Story 9. I'm slipping this in here for the few people that make it this far down to the thread. I'm also going to go opposite with the instructions as well. I was working at a 24-hour drugstore in Denver in the mid-90s. There were a lot of Russian immigrants that were living together close to the store. Every few days, an entire group would do their shopping together. There were about 4 sets of older people, and they entered the store, shopped, and checked out together. One of the sets brought their granddaughter. This adorable little girl had blonde hair, a beautiful smile, and bright blue eyes. If you saw her, you'd think, if a kid ended up looking this cute, having kids wouldn't be so bad. As each couple was rung up, this little girl translated everything. She communicated in English, and I assume Russian, between the grandparents and the checkers. This included handling the cash. She did this for everyone's shopping until they were all done. I approve of this child. I actually like to think that this is the majority of kids that exist. If you've got nice, involved parents that teach kids right from wrong and how to behave appropriately in public, and in private for that matter, kids are pretty good. But the squeaky wheel gets the oil, so we tend to just hear more stories about the really crap kids over the ones that are actually good. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of this video and have a wonderful day. Story 10. I was in grade 6, I believe. I had just lost my mom to a long battle of cancer. I was outside playing when this kid and I started arguing. Something gets said. He replies with, "Yeah, well, your mom looked at you and passed away." When he knew I was angry, he started to run away as fast as he could. I caught up to him, tackled him down, and then punched him until the teacher came and stopped us. The teacher asked what happened. I told him what he said. The teacher understood and just wanted us to forget it. We did. Reading what that kid said reminded me of what a bunch of kids at school said to me when I was 7. You're so ugly that when you were born, your mom took one look at you and got rid of you. I'm adopted. Reading this thread reminds me that kids can be cruel, but often don't understand the consequences of what they say. Story 11. I was babysitting my dad's ex-girlfriend's, was a current at the time, niece, and I couldn't get her to behave. She'd call me crude names, was attempting to paint on the carpet of my dad's living room, and threw several tantrums. So I stuck her in timeout, in what I believe to be a relatively safe place. Cordless phone, off the counter, and the next to the kitchen counter. When I turned my back, she stood up and threw it at me, beaming me in the back. I was so enraged, I grabbed her by the shirt and dragged her to a different corner away from anything and everything she could grab, and left her there for 3 hours. Every time she walked out of the corner, I dragged her back. Too long didn't read, little girl chucked a phone at me. Repetition of putting her back to where you wanted her to sit was exactly how you're supposed to handle a situation like that. Very well played. Story 12. I was at Target, and a woman with 2 small children was pushing a cart. The youngest was maybe a year old and was riding in the seat. The older one was a girl and couldn't have been more than 4 or 5. The older one was hanging off the side of the cart. The mother, in a very soft, motherly voice, said, "Honey, could you not do that? It makes it very hard for Mommy to push the cart." The child looks up at the mother with this total spawn of Satan look and says to her mother, "That's not true. You're just being a witch." The mother just sort of shook her head and kept going. I stopped in my tracks and had to compose myself for a minute. All I wanted to do was go smack that little girl in the mouth. I have a feeling the one you should be smacking is the girl's dad. Story 13. I was working at a grocery store when I heard a little boy, 5 maybe, ask his mom to buy him one of those crappy little toys that seem to be everywhere. She calmly told him to put it back, and he threw an absolute fit. She kept telling him to put the dang thing back, and he finally screamed out, "If Dad was alive, maybe you wouldn't be such a freaking witch." There was a brief pause, and you could see on the little mustard's face that he knew he messed up. The woman backhanded this kid right across the face and knocked him into the shelf. Bottles of salad dressing went everywhere. She picked the screaming kid up and took him outside to her car, came back in and helped me clean up the mess, then finished shopping. I wish more parents were as awesome as her. Beast mode engaged. Story 14. At my job in high school, these parents let their child run around like a maniac in the store while they did their shopping. At one point, the kid, who was old enough to know better, picked up a large bottle of cologne and chucked it hard at a toddler-aged kid. The toddler obviously started crying. Of course, I found the boy's parents and told them. They showed very little remorse, didn't even bother apologizing to the other parents, and most shocking of all, did not scold their son at all. No wonder why this kid thinks it's okay to behave that way. It was the parents who ended up sickening me more, though. This reminds me of when my brother-in-law taught my 2-year-old nephew how to play catch, which just turned into him throwing anything and everything at everyone. It was a rough couple of years. Story 15. I had just gotten off from a crappy day at work and was walking into Walmart to get some groceries. All of a sudden, this kid in his mother's arms reaches over and pinches the crap out of me. Normally, I would have just kept walking, but the kid was like 6, and his mom was carrying him like a baby, so I knew he knew better. I looked down at my arm, and there are nail marks that are turning red from where he was still holding on. I told the kid to let go and pushed his arm from me, and his mother started cussing me out in Spanish, telling me not to touch her baby. I hate children. The mother sounds like a witch. I mean, show your kid some discipline, people. Story 16. I was swimming with my 3-year-old son at the public pool. We were in the shallow end by the steps, and he was tiptoeing along to keep his head above water, when a wild ball appeared. My son reached an arm out to touch it, still bouncing on the tippiest of toes, when a snaggle-toothed, weird-shaped head 9-year-old pushed him down and under. I reached in and grabbed my son by the back of the neck, as I was certain he would be swallowing water. I took a quick look around for a watching parent. There was none. I proceeded to sweep the kid's feet out from under him, just as he was laughing about the ball hitting him in the head. SuccessKid.jpg. Pool story, bro. Story 17. I wear kilts regularly. A few days ago, I decided to walk up to the store while in my kilts. On the way there, I had to pass an elementary school that was just getting out, and holy freaking crap, I wanted to smack this one group of 10-year-olds. One of them starts trying to get in my face, saying, "Why don't you put on some pants, you freaking gay frick?" While all the other crints in this group were yelling similar things. It took all of my willpower to not pick the little crap up and throw him under a bus. I could imagine a large, hairy, kilted man brandishing a small child over his head and a caber tossing the sucker under a bus. Story 18. My stepsister is 18 years old and hits her mom, screams, slams doors, and breaks things when she gets upset. This is a daily occurrence. I recently told her that if she were to ever act that way towards me, I would call the police. She told me she would just tell them that I had abused her and that they would believe her because she's a girl. Her mom has allowed the daughter to be in complete control of the household and to act like this ever since the daughter was 7 years old, when her father died unexpectedly. Story 19. I was at a Chinese New Year's party, and being the only teenager at the party, Mom didn't trust me being alone in the house. I became best friends with the dog. There were also a bunch of little kids at the party, so a little boy wanted to play with the dog. His definition of play was grabbing the dog's fur, gouging its eyes, and yanking its tail. The whole time he was laughing maniacally. Lucky for him, this dog was really shy and didn't kill the little crap. I told the kid to stop, and he didn't, so I had to play keep the kid away from the dog for the rest of the night. Story 20. My mom works at a barn just across from our house. It goes to a house, pasture full of horses, neighbor's house, then a barn. So one day, I simply looked outside at the beautiful creatures, only to find the neighbor's kids literally leaned over the gates and slapping the horses across the face. Knowing my mom adores the horses, I went to her and said, "Mom, little girls are slapping the horses." To which her response was this: "No, they're not." Witnesses crime. "Oh my God!" And then yelling, "Stop slapping my freaking horses!" They didn't do it ever again. My mom's a bad butt over here. I like your mom. Story 21. I was at the library when a family came in, teenage brother with several little sisters. The mother was obviously frazzled and stressed. The brother whined and complained the whole time they were there, a real poophead. When they were lined up to check out their books, one of his sisters stood right in front of the counter. Her mouth was the exact height of the edge. The brother stood right behind her and shoved her hard against the counter. She smacked the crap out of her mouth and started crying. It took everything in me not to beat the crap out of that butthole. This made me fume. Story 22. I used to teach preschool. We had one 4-year-old boy named Clay, who looked exactly like Chucky, who had no business whatsoever being around other children. One day he managed to turn on the hose and drenched me so completely that I had to drive home and change. He was notorious for stealing shoes and throwing them into the pool. But the worst thing he did was rip the spinner off of a twister board and stab me in the stomach with it as hard as he could. I hated that little crap. Story 23. I saw some kids, probably around 10 or 12 years old, laughing it up in an alleyway I was walking down on my way back home one day. As I drew closer, the kids noticed me and scrammed. I came to the place where the kids had been playing, and there was a kitten twitching in its unalive throes. The kids had been throwing rocks at it. Lost my hope for the future and humanity right there. I'm fairly sure this is how serial killers are created. Story 24. One time I was eating with my parents and their friends, and their 2 or 3-year-old kid just jumped out of his seat and started running around the restaurant. 10 minutes later, our waitress brings the kid to the table, saying he almost burned himself on the stove, and the parents just said, "Oh, thanks," and continued their conversation, and let the kid run around again. A child will only burn themselves on the stove once, especially a commercial restaurant stove. Story 25. My friends and I were standing in the lunch queue at school. One of my friend's parents passed away, and that day was his first day back at school after weeks of absence. Most of the class was aware of what happened. This kid standing behind us noticed him and for no reason said, "Ah, your parents passed away." We then applied punches to his face. Please tell me the teacher said nothing happened, or at least it was self-defense. Story 26. I don't have any stories, but I will say this. If you have a child who acts like a chunt in public, and when he or she does, you just laugh it off, you are a terrible parent. I hate when people don't discipline their children. I hate children in general, but crap, don't do that. Really annoys me when kids throw tantrums and break stuff, and the parents just ignore it. Story 27. This is only horrible because she was repeating what her parents said. First grader. I want to be white. Me. Why? You're perfect just how you are. First grader. My mom says white people get whatever they want. Me. Really? I guess that's why your mom is driving a Mercedes and I'm driving a rusted Escort. In the kid's defense, you never stated you didn't want a rusted Escort. Story 28. There was a teacher at my school who had a car accident. She was in the hospital for about 3 weeks until she passed away from her injuries. They called all of her students to the auditorium to inform them of her passing. Immediately after the announcement, some little doofwad stood up, didn't even wait to be called on, and indignantly asked how this would affect her grade. Story 29. A friend of mine lost her husband. It was the day of his funeral, and we were in the car behind the hearse. 2 kids, ages 10 to 12, on bikes, start riding alongside our car, look in the windows, and start chanting, "Someone died, someone died." I have never felt the urge to inflict pain on someone so much. You should have swerved into them. Story 30. I used to work at a fairly large supermarket in the bread and cake section. One day, as I was working away, minding my own business, there was a family deciding which birthday cake to buy. The girl picked up a boxed cake, then proceeded to punch it very hard a few times, then put it back. Her mother didn't do a thing about it. Story 31. I once saw a mother and 2 children, a boy and a girl, both less than 5. The children were bickering playfully when the boy said, "Oh yeah? Well, Dad wanted an abortion." The mother, playing on her phone, didn't say or do a thing. I mean, what clearly happened was that the kids heard and quoted part of an argument, but still, so messed up. Story 32. My sister is mentally disabled. She has severe scoliosis, and her face is disfigured because of her medication. There have been instances of children in church teasing her and calling her ugly. My neighbor's mustardly little brother needed to tell me she was ugly for some goddamn reason. Freaking hate kids. You make it sound like being in church makes them better people automatically. Story 33. My roommate has a large family, and one of his young sisters, Sally Ann, who is currently 12 years old, is pure evil. When she was about 2 or 3 years old, she threatened to end the life of my roommate, John, who then responded that she couldn't do that. She said, "I could if I had a stick with fire at the end of it." Story 34. That's not your spot. This isn't even your house. You don't belong here. Dad's girlfriend's kids when I was babysitting the little shoots, so they didn't have to go to their grandmother's house. It was the house my dad and girlfriend bought together. Wanted to smack them so hard. You should follow them around and fart on everything. Story 35. I worked at a bank that gave kids lollipops. I handed this boy one, and he proceeded to open it. His dad says, "Say thank you." And the little chunt says no, and his dad just smiles at me. Story 36. I once witnessed a young boy screaming at his mother that he wanted sweets, and then repeatedly punching her in the breast until she gave in and bought him a cookie. What a brat. Story 37. I came into this thread expecting to laugh at stories of spoiled little brats throwing tantrums in supermarkets. Instead, I'm just really sad. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.